Okay, afternoon everybody. I'm going to be talking about effective management of Windows 10 and 11 devices with Workspace ONE. I appreciate that's a render of a MacBook, but we'll ignore that. I've put the Windows background in there to sort of even it out, and I've slapped a big Workspace ONE logo in there as well, so there should be no confusion. So to give a quick introduction, I'm the one on the left, if anybody gets confused. My name is Brad Grimstead. I work for a company called Rentokil Initial, one of the leading companies in pest control. I work on the global desktop engineering team for Rentokil. Predominantly, one of my day-to-day responsibilities is looking after our global Workspace ONE environment. I believe we've got 58,478 plus devices. We've actually got 58,479, but the plus sounds a little bit cooler, I think. And we're in 93 countries. This was 90 last time I checked, so I don't know where those last 3 came from. We acquire businesses pretty much every week, so I suspect something happened in the past few weeks, which is where those last 3 countries came from. My LinkedIn address is at the bottom, or LinkedIn name. I forget what the terminology is these days. If anybody wants to connect with me or add me, feel free if you can find me. So to give a very quick overview of the sort of thing I'll be talking about today, I'll start with explaining the story of how we as a business got to Workspace ONE, what Workspace ONE is and what it can do for you as a company, how Workspace ONE can help you to automate things like repetitive tasks that just start to get a bit tedious over time. Stuff like the Hub Services application repository for enabling end users to install applications a little bit more, I guess, easier without having to contact IT and involve service desks and support teams. And then I'll go over some of the other features like Freestyle Orchestrator, sensors, Workspace ONE Intelligence, the journey to Windows 11, update, security, and so on. There's only about 400 slides, so if nobody falls asleep, that's a win. So this picture on the right probably scares everybody a little bit. For anybody who doesn't know, it's from the WannaCry ransomware variant. So if you cast your minds back to 2016, 2017, WannaCry hit. I believe the first organisation it hit on sort of a mainstream level was the NHS, and then it sort of expanded from there onwards to multiple businesses. At the time, we had those same nerves, I guess, that fear of, what if we get hit with this ransomware? What are we going to do? We didn't have any MDM solution or proper device management in place for our Windows devices at the time. In fact, a large proportion of our end user real estate was actually running Windows 7. I suspect most businesses were as well back in 2016-17. So there was a bit of a push to get most of our end user devices onto Windows 10 really, but also to report on those vulnerabilities globally. So if you remember, WannaCry seemed to affect a certain version of Windows 10, 8, 7 XP and so on, but it was only certain versions. There was actually a patch release that rectified that issue. We had no way of reporting on this because, like I say, we had no MDM solution in place to actually fix this. So we did what any company would do in that situation, and we went to sheets.google.com and we sent it out to all our global admins and we said, tell us what versions of Windows you're running. It took over 4 months. Not ideal with stuff like WannaCry, which is where AirWatch came into play. I know what some of you are probably thinking, AirWatch of Workspace ONE. So AirWatch is Workspace ONE. If anybody's wondering what Workspace ONE is an agent that sits on the machine. It's used for device enrollments predominantly in the context that I'm going to be speaking about today. It's an MDM solution, so mobile device management. Basically, the agent, you see the icon on the right, it sits on the machine. For the most part, it executes stuff at system level, where you give it the permissions to do this. And it's just a really nice way to configure and manage your device fleet. So we use it for Android, Windows, Mac, iOS. I believe we've tinkered with Linux, but I can't confidently say that. But we use it to manage all of our end-user devices. So I'm going to be talking about Windows, but like I say, pretty much any operating system you can think of, Workspace ONE will look after it. You can use it for stuff like making sure apps and devices are patched, profiles are pushed out for configurations, CSPs hit the machine and get customized, and just for stuff like remote deployments, whether that's PowerShell, Batch, Shell, just whatever you want. And to be honest, this is probably my favorite benefit. I'm going to try and be cool with a laser pointer. You don't have to interrupt the user's workday. Back in the day, it'd be contact the service desk, contact your support teams, get them to contact the users, start doing stuff, and obviously that takes up the user's day. They don't want to come into work and sit there for hours while IT are fooling around. With Workspace ONE, you take that out of the equation. You test this stuff, you push it out, the user's got no idea it's happened, but you've secured the machine, or you've updated it, or you've deployed an application. Pretty much the possibilities are endless in terms of what Workspace ONE can do on the machine. So in terms of how Workspace ONE can help you as a business with your devices, I've put these 3 screenshots on the right. They're not just random screenshots I found this morning. They're from our intelligence dashboards. So you see the one on the right says Windows Firewall enabled 99%, 1.5K. So that's our 1,500 devices in the UK. We've actually used Workspace ONE to deploy a firewall rather than relying on a third-party solution. We let Workspace ONE do the work for us, let Workspace ONE manage the firewall. We add the exclusions, we add the customizations, let Workspace ONE do the heavy lifting. You see real player installs in the top right. You'll also see no data available. And the reason for that is because there was a time where we noticed when a real player vulnerability was released. We had quite a few machines with real player on. The first question we had was, why do our machines have real player on? In the days of VLC and Windows Media Player, and just every media player there is baked into Windows, why are we running real player? At the time, that was something like, I don't know, say 200 devices as an example. We very quickly used Workspace ONE and pushed out a script to remove real player. We called the uninstaller executable, deployed the uninstaller. We used the Workspace ONE suite of features, stuff like Freestyle Orchestrator, products, scripts, and we got it to the point where it's at 0 now globally, or so we think. Pretty impressive stuff, really, because like I say, back in the day, you'd contact those teams, get them to do it, and you just never hit 0, really. It just weren't going to happen. We've got there, and the users didn't know either. It was as simple as raise a change, make sure everybody's happy. We did the testing in our UAT and dev environments, and then we just pushed out that product. Next thing you know, no devices with real player. You see Adobe, it's a very similar situation, except for this one, we put in the name was 520 over the past 24 hours. The reason for that is midway through the change, we realized, okay, we've got 520 machines with Adobe on that have come online in the past 24 hours. The last time I checked, it was at 13, and that's probably just machines that have installed it after we've removed it. But it's really powerful stuff, Workspace ONE. So like I said earlier, the possibilities, they're endless. You can report on these vulnerable applications. You can configure your security, whether that's making sure BitLocker is encrypting all of the disks on a machine, configuring the antivirus, the firewall, Windows updates for patching, removing that reliability on WSUS, or even just for stuff like deploying third-party apps. I mean, Office here is a great example. Back in the day, again, with Office, we used to install it, take a good hour or so, get on the user's machine, punch in that license key or whatever you was using for activation, hope nothing bad happened, it'd install. We've created a really lightweight profile in Workspace ONE now, following some of the best practice guides that are out there by some of the VMware staff. And all we do now is when somebody requests Office, it's seriously as simple as we click install on that profile on a machine. And again, it does it all silently, which is what I really like about it. Nobody even knows it's happening. Office just installs, and it's the latest version, Office 365. You customize it to your liking. We want the Pro version, and we want all these languages. We want this architecture. We want these products, but we don't want Visio. Workspace ONE handles it. We don't have to worry. It even decides what update channel streams that Office utilizes. So for this kind of thing, Workspace ONE's really good at automating those tedious tasks. We use it for deploying in-house built applications as well. I'm sure some of you have got these proprietary apps that are a bit of a pain that were created back in 2003, and they depend on all sorts of dependencies, ActiveX controls and DLLs. We can deploy those now in an automated fashion with Workspace ONE. We package them up. We tell like a PowerShell script how to call the install, what to install first, second, and so on. And then we just let Workspace ONE do the rest. Workspace ONE installs these apps, and that's it. That's the process. We use it for making sure our devices are up to date. I'll cover this one in a little bit more detail later on because it's a pretty big one. And we use it for stuff like deploying PowerShell scripts and just making sure that our end users have got a better experience on a day-to-day basis. For example, hub services, which you might have heard me mention a slide ago or so. And again, I'll cover that one in a little bit more detail. That has freed up so much of our time now. Again, I'll speak about that one in depth because it's a really interesting topic, I feel. But it's pretty great what you can do with Workspace ONE in terms of management. So in terms of automating these repetitive tasks, Workspace ONE's great at letting you upload applications. There's 2 ways you can do it that are probably the right way, I would say. Obviously, there's more ways you could do it, but these are the 2 sort of supported methods. The first one is the Enterprise App Repository. You see on the right there, I've put a little screenshot in of what the Enterprise App Repository is. It's basically just a suite of applications that the VMware team that look after the Enterprise App Repository have put together. It's usually a list of commonly installed applications, so stuff like, Firefox, Adobe, iTunes, Notepad++. And then they also put stuff like the languages, the architecture, 32-bit, 64-bit, and the versions. This has been helpful for us. I mean, in countries like, for example, France, they might decide we want to install Firefox, but we want to install only the French version. rather than having to go looking for the MSI or the EXE, packaging it up, testing it, go into the enterprise app repository, select it, press next again, press finish, done. The second way is uploading it yourself. The best way to think about this one is if you can install an application yourself on a machine, chances are you can also do it through Workspace ONE, whether you're uploading that EXE or the MSI wrapper, or even if you're just packaging it up into a script or a product, PowerShell file, and then a bunch of EXEs or whatever, you can upload it into Workspace ONE. Chances are you can get it into that app catalog and available on those end user machines. I've put together this live demo. I've added but not really because it's not a live demo at all. It's a pre-recording because every live demo I ever see never goes well. And there is no way I'm risking a live demo on this laptop. I do want to quickly add, when I made this video, I wasn't actually able to preview it afterwards, so excuse any mistakes. The reason being, we removed VLC as well through Workspace ONE to address vulnerabilities. I tried to play the fancy MKV container video, no VLC on the machine. So let's just hope for the best. So you can see I downloaded the latest version of Notepad++ because we've got Notepad version 1 in our U18 environment. Not great, severely out of date. All I do is choose a file, select the latest EXE, 8.5.2, let that upload, and then it's just as simple as giving it a name and listing the criteria. So I just put Notepad++, I choose version 8.5.2. If this was an MSI, it'd fill this in automatically because it contains all of the metadata, but because of it being an EXE, I just input it myself. Throw in the silent uninstall command and install command, same way as if you'd install the software through a command line. Usually it's just exe/s for silent so you don't interrupt the users. And then I just tell Workspace ONE how to know if the upgrades happened. So I just say the file exists. If you go to Program Files, Notepad++, notepad++.exe, you'll see that Notepad++ is installed on the latest version. You can actually specify versions as well. And then I give it a pretty icon so that when the end users open that catalog, they think, wow, those guys in IT are great. Or at least, that's what I think they think. I assign it to a smart group. In this case, I'll just use my own testing group, which contains like my VMs and my test devices. Press publish, and at this point, Notepad++ is actually available on the machines. There are a few ways you can deploy it. You can do on-demand or automatic. On-demand is exactly as it sounds. If somebody wants it, it's there. If not, no problem. Automatic is basically, it's going to that machine. The user doesn't really have a say in that case, which is really helpful for stuff like, again, those proprietary applications. So in terms of automating repetitive tasks, rather than adding and uploading applications like I've just gone over, removing apps, I've put a little GIF on to show what you can do if you've uploaded that app. So you see I uploaded Notepad++. All I do in this GIF is I go into Workspace ONE, I click More, I click Delete, blast Notepad++. You know, a lot of times you might find you're no longer licensing software, you no longer have a need for it, a vulnerability's been discovered, or, you know, there's a variety of reasons why you may choose not to use it. You might even have a competitor's product. If you've already uploaded that app into Workspace ONE, you can just delete it. As long as you specified those uninstall commands, and again, if it's an MSI rather than an EXE, you don't even need to do that. Workspace ONE will pull it from the machines if you tell it to. However, you may also have a couple of cases where software is a little bit more tricky to remove. We run into this quite often. So, sometimes old software doesn't like to be removed. Maybe it's because you installed it before you went to MDM. You know, before you went to Workspace ONE, you installed an application, you installed some in-house software. Whatever the reason is, sometimes software just doesn't like to be removed. And to be honest, this is where I feel like Workspace ONE shines, especially for us. I've listed a couple of examples on the right again, you know, different methods of removing software. You can see at the top here, I've just put a one-line batch file together, wmic product, where name is Java, uninstall it, do it silently. The user doesn't need to be aware we're removing Java. If there's a problem, they'll soon let us know. I've also put together a little workflow. Check if this app exists, VLC, is it less than version 2.2.9? If it is, run this 32-bit uninstaller. If it's the 64-bit version and it's this version, run the 64-bit uninstaller. So that one there, the second one is Freestyle Orchestrator. I'll cover that one a little bit later as well. But there are a few examples here, so scripts, Freestyle, products. Best way to think of them is like packages. Similar to the apps, you can upload multiple things into a package, zip it up, send it out as a product, let Workspace ONE remove it. And then at the bottom is just an example of that script that I've uploaded. I've put it into PowerShell, converted the syntax into PowerShell, and just sent it out to machines. To be honest, this makes life a lot easier when it comes to removing products as well, because if you integrate it with Workspace ONE Intelligence, you can actually report on the status of this removal, which is really good for like when you need to report to management or your line manager or whoever. You know, I'll give an example. We've recently removed Java in our UK computers. Using Workspace ONE Intelligence, we was able to go, you know, there's, I don't know, 1,000 devices running Java. We've got a way of removing it with Workspace ONE. We pushed that through, and then Workspace ONE Intelligence updated in real time and told us how many devices had Java. So we could track that progress, or we could tweak the script. You know, okay, it's removed on 500, but those last 500, they're not budging. Why is that? And maybe it was because the naming convention of the version was different, or whatever reason. I've put together another live demo, just showing how quickly, you know, you can remove software with Workspace ONE using something like a script. So I've got my Notepad++. I don't want to remove the application from Workspace ONE because we're using it in dev, but I can throw together a quick script, give it a name, remove Notepad++, description, just so you can let the other admins know what you're doing if ever they come to see it. And then you just give it that line which I spoke about earlier, you know, start the process, look for uninstall.exe, do it silently. You see on my VM here, when I navigate to that file path of Notepad++, you should see the uninstall.exe file. Again, you don't have to do this. You know, you can just call WMIC and get it to query the system for the software and uninstall it. You can use whatever syntax you like, really. As long as it will work, you can do it through Workspace ONE. When I look at this script, I can query the machine or send it through. When you create these, you can tell it how often to execute it every login, log out, reboot, do it once. I chose to do it once, push the change to my script, sync my VM, and you should see Notepad++ start to remove. As the files remove, the directory also gets deleted. The VM kicks me out of the Notepad++ folder because Workspace ONE's deleted Notepad++. I do just want to say as well, my VM on this laptop is not the quickest. If you did this on a production machine with a decent spec, it's going to be an awful lot quicker. I mean, it was pretty quick on my VM, but Workspace ONE's pretty quick at how it does this. You've no longer got to wait for like group policy changes or whatever it is you're using. You don't have to wait 24 hours. Push it out with Workspace ONE. If the machine's online, it's checking in, it'll blast the software. So, the Hub Services application repository. I've put a GIF together on the right of what this is. I mentioned earlier we're removing Java, and you can see OpenJDK. For anybody who doesn't know what that is, OpenJDK is Microsoft's open source alternative to Java. A lot of applications that have dependencies on Java can now actually use OpenJDK. The reason I bring up Java is because I feel it's a pretty great example. A few years ago, if we would have tried to remove something like Java, you know, we might have, let's say, 20 of those 1,000 call up and say, hang on, I've opened up Finance Application 2002, and it's saying I need Java. What have you done? And it'd be a bit of a panic. You know, everybody would get into a crash call. There'd be an emergency, a P1. We don't have that these days. We get 1 or 2 people call up with a problem, and it's just immediately, right, how do we solve this? Okay. OpenJDK exists. Okay, this is quite simple. Get it into Hub Services, put it as on demand for all devices. If anybody has a problem, they open the Workspace ONE icon on their desktop, click OpenJDK, and click install. It's also really useful for those applications which you don't mind every user having access to. You know, maybe those applications don't need licensing, maybe they're open source, they're just useful. Put them in Hub Services, they can install and uninstall them if you want them to. You can actually remove that capability of uninstalling if you choose. Personally, I feel like if you're going to put it there for everybody to have the choice, you might as well stick uninstalling. On the GIF to the right, I show Cisco and OpenJDK, so like our VPN connection, and I just gave it a quick description just to say, you know, for the end users, this software is what gets you onto the company's internal network, so they know where to go, and then stuff like 7-Zip, Google Drive, just those kind of applications really that are useful to have, but not necessary to do work. Workspace ONE profiles are another pretty great selling point in Workspace ONE, I think. To be honest, most of our work gets done through these. I mentioned earlier stuff like Windows updates, BitLocker encryption, the firewall. This entire list on the left, we've pretty much done all of them at this point. Like, we've messed around with all of them. All it does is it calls on the native CSPs that exist within Windows 10 and 11 at the OS level, and it just customizes them. I have added hyperlinks, and when these slides get sent out, you can always have a look if you're interested. But the CSPs provided by Microsoft in 10 and 11, Workspace ONE calls on them, customizes them, pushes that config out to the machines. There is a custom settings tab at the bottom as well. So if any of those CSPs, and Microsoft update them regularly, don't appear on the left-hand side, you can actually customize them yourself into an XML file, which we've had to do, and push it out. We've used profiles for everything. It's pretty straightforward stuff. Name your profile, tell it what groups you want it to hit, and then just customize it. We use it for encrypting all of our devices. The second they get built and enrolled into Workspace ONE, they get encrypted with BitLocker. That recovery key is stored within that central management solution of Workspace ONE. We use it for pushing out stuff like that Windows Defender firewall. We use it for Windows updates. It's really powerful stuff, to be honest, and it takes away a lot of that old school reliance on infrastructure. You no longer have to rely on W-source or external firewalls if you don't choose to or want to. You know, a lot of companies are moving to the cloud, and this really helps facilitate that migration to the cloud. And again, because I love these live demos, I promise you there's not many. Very quick example of adding a profile with Workspace ONE. You'll have to excuse the resolution of this one. I'm going to blame the Google Drive compression. I'll give it a very quick name. Change wallpaper. I appreciate that's probably very difficult to read, so I'll try and read it out. I'll tell it what smart group I want it to go to. Again, I'll just tell it to go to my test group of VMs and devices. And then on the left, on my categories, after I've gave it a description, I can choose what I want to do. In this example, just going to change the wallpaper. Branding is important to a lot of companies when it comes to changing the lock screen and the wallpaper. So all I'm going to do is, I've decided we're going to use the best wallpaper that was ever created, and we're going to blast that to every machine. So I choose a file, upload my JPEG or my PNG, and I send it out to the devices. For most devices, you reboot, that wallpaper will apply. There are a couple of prerequisites, I believe, to this personalization profile. I recently spoke to VMware about this, and Microsoft are also looking into it. The CSP, Microsoft say it works with Windows 10 Pro and 11 Pro, but we're seeing pretty mixed results. Education and other OSs, Enterprise, believe it works, but Pro, I think Microsoft are looking into, because there seems to be mixed results on whether or not it will work. But in this example, applied the profile, I can sync Workspace ONE. Syncing it just gets Workspace ONE to talk to the environment instantly. It will check in automatically, and if it's connected to the connector, it'll do it instantly regardless, but I sync it because of demonstration purposes anyway. And then after this machine's rebooted, oh, that didn't do what I thought it was going to do. Right, okay. Sorry about that. So, we get our user to sign back in. And if the profile was set up correctly, he should now have the greatest wallpaper that was ever created on his machine. And there it is. You know, it's just a very, very small example of what Workspace ONE can do. You know, it's not just changing wallpapers. It's stuff like that firewall, like updates, like encryption, like restrictions on machines. You know, you may not want it to access certain File Explorer settings. You may not want to enable certain edge settings. It can be as simple or as complex as you like it to be honest, Workspace ONE. And that's kind of the beauty of it. So scripts and tags in Workspace ONE, they're exactly what they sound like, nothing complex to it. A tag is just tagging the machine, telling it what it is. We use it for a few things. We use it for leavers, we use it for our high value members, so people who work on like the finance and our treasury teams. We use it for our Windows 11 pilots, or we're looking at using it for Windows 11 pilots. All you do is tell Workspace ONE, if this machine's tagged, it belongs to this group, and then all you do is you assign actions to that tag. You know, you could do something like assign a leaver tag and tell Workspace ONE after X amount of days, notify me on this device, or do X, Y, or Z action. For high-value targets, you can have it deploy CIS security baselines. Soon as a machine gets a high-value target tag, get those baselines on the machine to lock it down, get these security restrictions in place, deploy these applications, you know, Qualys, deploy the Dell Command software suite. We want those drivers updated. Deploy a different Windows update profile. We don't want these machines deferring updates for a week. Day zero, we want patches hitting those machines. We can't take any risks with them. You know, Windows 11, you could potentially use tags for that. Tag a machine as a Windows 11 pilot, have a Windows 11 profile, hit the machine, and patch it. The user doesn't need to know anything's happened. They can come back the next day. They're on Windows 11. You can actually also integrate automations and workflows with these. So I speak about intelligence and freestyle. We've got an automation workflow set up here, where if a device tag contains high value and it doesn't get the enrollment status is no longer enrolled because it's been removed, Workspace ONE will immediately send us an email and a Slack API message. So immediately we'll get a notification in Slack on our devices and say, look, this high value machine is no longer in Workspace ONE. We'll get an email to the same effect. It's like, what's going on? This machine is no longer in Workspace ONE. what's going on. It's no longer secure. It's no longer compliant. Freestyle Orchestrator. This is basically VMware's automation workflow engine. It's a pretty incredible and powerful tool, to be honest. We've used it for a handful of things and we've barely scratched the surface. We've tested removing applications with it. We did Adobe Air, I believe. We let that sit for a few weeks and we forgot we did it. We came back and again, it was 0 machines and it was like, right, that's a happy little accident, that is. 0 machines with this vulnerable software, great. We had a problem with a SID mismatch on some of our machines. We did a domain migration and we noticed that as you move an ID account from one domain to another, you can sometimes get a SID mismatch. The identifier changes. Again, back in the day, it would have been, you know, panic, P1, emergency. These days, it was get the Workspace one team into a call. We very quickly put together something in Freestyle Orchestrator as a proof of concept, and we were like, look, we can identify the SID with a sensor. We can identify what the SID should be with a sensor, and we can compare if there's a mismatch. And using Freestyle Orchestrator, you could push out a script to fix that mismatch if needed, if everything was to break, if that's not rectified. We can use it for stuff like high-value target data compliance. So again, you know, we've got these high-value targets, and it can be if they're in this group, make sure Qualys is installed, check RDP is disabled. If it's not, disable RDP. Also, get rid of VLC because it seems to have vulnerabilities in the version we're installing. You can use it for all sorts, stuff like potential Windows 11 pilots, making sure your security settings are up to scratch. Again, with Freestyle, it's like a lot of stuff with Workspace ONE, it's just whatever you want to do with it. If you can think about it and you can put it together, there's no reason you can't action it. Sensors, I really like these, as you can see by our test environment and my machine with a ton of sensors. They're tiny little PowerShell one-liner scripts, to be honest. They just retrieve one line of information and they punch it into the UEM console. And again, if you're integrated with Workspace ONE Intelligence, you can retrieve that information in Intelligence and spit out reports based on those sensors. You can see on the right, you know, I'm pulling in stuff like build numbers, so what feature updates are our machines running. This was before Workspace ONE implemented it natively in the console. So again, that's actually probably a pretty good example. Back in the day, you couldn't report on what version of Windows you were running in Workspace ONE in terms of the full feature update or the security update. We very quickly put that together in Sensors as a workaround and was able to retrieve that information and report on it. We can tell if our profiles are working, you know, how long are quality updates deferred for. If we've set the profile to 7, but the sensor reports 0, we know that profile's not working. Maybe the machines are still looking up to some WSUS server that we didn't know existed, or there's some group policy object that we didn't know about that's still hitting that machine in that particular branch. We used it when a Dell CVE vulnerability came out. I believe that was a 0-day, maybe a year or 2 ago, probably a bit longer now. My time's a bit all over the place. But there was this vulnerability, and the way to detect it was based on whether this sys file was present on a machine, on these Dell devices. Again, we had a panic because we're a pretty large Dell customer. Most of our machines, the Windows, tend to be Dell. And again, it was right, Workspace ONE, put a sensor in. How many machines have got that sys file present? If they have, put something in Workspace ONE to rectify the problem. There was an out-of-band patch that Microsoft released. We was able to get that out to fix that problem. We did stuff like I mentioned with the SID mismatch, getting the enrollment SID, checking RDP, using it for uptime. That's a pretty big one. I'm not sure how many of you have done this recently, but you contact a user who's having a problem, or rather that user contacts you. You ask them when the last time they rebooted was. They take the mick out of you a little bit. They tell you they did it 5 minutes ago. You check the uptime on Task Manager, and all of a sudden it was 6 years ago, and you're thinking, hang on a sec. Rather than having to do that, we can tell our service desk, go into Workspace ONE, pull the device up, which they usually do on tickets anyway, I guess, to deploy apps and check stuff over. Just click the Sensors tab, and it'll tell you the last time they rebooted. And if it's 4 days, you can say, ask them to reboot, or do it for them. This is a huge one as well that I was going to take credit for, but I recently spoke to Sam Aykroyd, and he's the guy who did it. When Windows 11 came out, and I'll come on to this a bit later as well, we pushed out a sensor to detect if a machine was ready for Windows 11. Was the processor capable? Was the TPM chip enabled? Did the device specification meet the requirements? Again, it's a pretty great way to do that. We used Workspace ONE, and all of a sudden we know which machines can go to Windows 11. And again, from a management perspective as well, it's pretty great for them. We can say to them, look, we've got, we'll say 55,000 devices. 44,000 can go to Windows 11, but 11,000 can't. We might need to replace those 11,000 at some point. We might need to update them. We might need to get new devices in. It can help from a financial perspective as well. We've recently used sensors for the following. So our network and infrastructure team came to us and said, we want to know what proxy pack file our machines are using. We can do it, but it's going to take us a lot of time. Don't tell our network or infrastructure team, might need to cut this bit out of the video, we can do it in about 5 minutes with Workspace ONE with a PowerShell sensor. I told them it'd take months, but it can take about 5 minutes. We used it for that Windows 11 stuff, for uptime, and this is the beauty of sensors. You're not just benefiting yourself, you're benefiting your network team, your service desk, your support. All the different teams can benefit from the information being retrieved and put into one place. So, probably my favourite thing to talk about is Windows updates. Probably one of our biggest successes. I would say that because it's mostly my success, I would argue. When I started at Rentokil, we had a bit of a problem with patching, where, like I say, 93 countries, however many devices running Windows, there was a problem with patching. It wasn't exactly where it should be. You know, WSUS, maintaining it across the globe, it was pretty difficult stuff, especially with a large amount of devices. We was always a pretty flexible work environment, even before COVID, so working from home was always a factor. We decided to get rid of WSUS, get rid of the infrastructure, and again, let Workspace ONE do that heavy lifting with updating. We just let Workspace ONE manage the patching. Workspace ONE tells the machines where to look for those patches. It utilises those Windows 10 and 11 CSPs and says, use Windows Updates as a service. Don't bother with WSUS. Go directly to Microsoft. We utilise peer-to-peer as well. Again, you don't have to worry about that network problem anymore. No more worrying about the network traffic. Just let peer-to-peer occur. One person downloads the update, passes it to 4 of their mates in the background, then 4 pass it to their mates. Before you know it, everybody's patched, and that's what we're seeing. This is from our intelligence dashboards. The past 7 days, 13,300 devices, you know, it's looking at like approximately 95% patched. If you were to pull out the deferral periods, because we have our set up into multiple rings, a quarter of our machines will patch every 4 days, a quarter will patch every 3, a quarter will patch every 6, just to save that sort of disruption. If you was to remove those deferrals, it's probably quite a lot higher. It gives you full control as well over the parity of feature and quality. You know, you can decide what feature packs machines are getting, what quality packs they're getting. You can decide if they're going to Windows 10 or 11. There's a lot of granularity. Again, you know, you're not having to use WSUS either. It's just one profile. Nobody has to maintain it. Nobody has to approve updates. And I think back to stuff like COVID as well. I mean, you know, we were quite lucky where we'd already implemented this, but when COVID hit and all of a sudden everybody was at home, we didn't have to worry about people contacting WSUS or getting on a VPN or group policy, because Workspace ONE was just patching them while they was at home. There was no issues. It's been a pretty great success, to be honest. Which brings us on to the Windows 11 journey. So I woke up one morning, maybe everyone else was made more aware than me, but Windows 11 had suddenly come out of nowhere seemingly overnight, or at least it had been announced. I could have sworn they said Windows 10 was the last one, but apparently not. So it was pretty slow to come out, the information at the beginning, especially regarding enterprise machines. There was a lot of rumours and hearsay. People were contacting the people who run the Windows Updates as a service at Microsoft, and thankfully they were very transparent with the information and reassured a lot of us. But information was slow at the beginning, and I think a lot of people probably had the same worry as us. You know, we wanted to block most people from going to Windows 11. But we also wanted to control who would go to 11 as a pilot. But more than anything, we didn't want to wake up the day Windows 11 actually released to the public and find all of our business machines had gone to Windows 11, because that just felt like a nightmare waiting to happen. So Workspace ONE let us do everything we wanted in a pretty controlled fashion. We immediately blocked everybody from going to Windows 11 through, again, a profile of the CSP. We put together a pilot program, and this was all within a couple of days. Someone, I'm not sure if it was a VMware employee, if it was the Workspace ONE staff, somebody had put together a really slick knowledge base article on how to do exactly what we needed. We stopped everyone going to 11, put our pilots onto 11, and touch wood, we haven't had any problems. It's actually been a bit of a dream, to be honest. But again, all of this was possible with Workspace ONE. So, very quick video, and this is the last one, on moving to Windows 11. You have to bear with me, Google Slides. Okay, we'll do it the old-fashioned way. We'll just zoom in. I promise you all the resolution was much better if it would have gone to full screen. But anyway, I checked for updates on that machine if anybody didn't see it. It says you're up to date. I'll push out this little Enable Windows 11 profile in Workspace ONE, and that's literally all there is to it. I promise you there is no CGI going on here. I'll click checking for updates again on that same machine. Windows 11 starts downloading, you know, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on to 100. Not going to make you all watch the full process. or I'd way overgo my 45 minutes. But that was how simple it was to get Windows 11 on a machine. I literally, in real time, checked for an update, went into Workspace 1, installed the 11 profile, pressed check for updates. That machine is on Windows 11. So that comes into Workspace 1 intelligence as well. I've mentioned it a couple of times now, but intelligence is basically used by us predominantly for real-time data streams. We fetch and collect information with Workspace 1 intelligence and use it to put together widgets and dashboards. Especially for Windows 11, that's where it's really useful. We pull in who can go to 11, we pull in who's on 11, we can report what countries are running it, where they're running it, and then we can contact those admins and find out what's going on. You know, why are you running 11? Okay, you're doing a pilot program. Have you run into any issues? And we can report on all sorts with it, whether it's quality updates, whether it's application installs. Again, if the information's in Workspace 1, you can fetch it in intelligence 9 times out of 10. You'll see here in the bottom right, we've integrated it as well with Slack, and we've got these immediate notifications that come in and say, I mean, we've got it for everything, stuff like devices enrolled, but we've also got it for machines moved to 11. So all of a sudden we get notified, you know, this device in France has moved to Windows 11. We can contact the admins in France and say, look, you've got a machine running to 11. You know, are you aware of that? Is it intentional? And then if it's not, we can help them sort of fix that. It's really good for helping us keep track of stuff like those pilot programs. So improving security and productivity with Workspace 1. Obviously, I've gone over quite a lot, but you can really just sort of do whatever you need in Workspace 1 when it comes to security and productivity. You know, you can use a combo of profiles, apps, scripts, tags, anything you like, and pretty dramatically increase that security and productivity. In a lot of cases, you know, you can save hours of time on your devices. You've no longer got to contact users. Let Workspace 1 automate it all for you. You can assign roles to a user. For example, if we've got a pest control technician, once he's in that pest control group, he'll get those pest control profiles and applications that only our pest control technicians require. These are just a couple of examples of stuff you can do, but this seriously barely scratches the surface of what's possible. Our build process, a lot of it is reliant now upon Workspace 1. We deploy applications based upon a persona. You can see I'm in our UAT dev environment. I'm in the IT group. I get all of the funky applications that I've packaged up for testing, and they come down. If you were a pest control technician, you might only get the pest control apps. If you were medical, maybe only the medical apps. So apps can be deployed on persona. Configs can be deployed based on location. Like I say, our technicians in France or Spain can get stuff based on their location. And you can ensure you're not impacting performance either. You know, there's restrictions that can be put in place for stuff like making sure devices don't patch if they're using cellular rather than Wi-Fi. So to very quickly recap, you can use Workspace 1 to manage your devices, regardless of the OS usually, report on stuff like vulnerabilities and applications. You can use it for stuff like application installs through hub services. You've got pretty granular control over your configuration. You can do all sorts of security reports, patching. You can deploy scripts to machines, retrieve your BitLocker keys from a central location. You can control your Windows 11 pilot program. You can deploy a firewall. There's a variety of things you can do, to be honest. And I do want to emphasize I've barely scratched the surface on what you can do with Workspace 1. I've very quickly gone over quite a bit of what Workspace 1's capable of. So if anybody has any questions, feel free. Also, feel free to contact me on email or LinkedIn. Go for it.
You mentioned you've got domains, but obviously you're not taking anything from the Microsoft domain now. You're not taking WSUS. Do you need the domain, or can you actually run Workspace 1 without using the domain?
In terms of Windows updates?
Yeah, in terms of the whole thing, you take a machine and not having domain joined.
Oh yeah. So some of our test machines that aren't domain joined, they're fine in Workspace 1. They're enrolled in. Yeah, just deploy the agent, let it do everything. Or the vast majority of our VMs and test machines, you know, we don't always bother getting them on the domain. They're just out of the box. Deploy the Workspace 1 agent, let it control the machine and configure it.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Thanks so much.